have to like move my hand over this way.
There you
Oh,
go.
to be seen.
Oh, it's opposite.
So I think the sound, where's the little mic? I know that if you walk away from it, it's harder for the people on Zoom to hear. Can one of you exec or people pick up the, wait, but how will you pay for it? Yes, you could use my card. Hope they let you do that. Or do any of you, the coffee is apparently ready at the Starbucks in the UC, I mean, in the bookstore.
I'll go.
Are you sure? Yeah. Save the receipt because you get reimbursed for it.
I'll go.
Or do you want to take my card?
Nope, I got
Don't
it.
go buy a car or something.
I got it. Do I need to go with you?
I would ask your office.
No, I'll carry the coffee. I got his plates.
I walked right past it to get here, but I wanted to bring the food first and then figure out what was gonna happen.
But yeah, I'll be back.
Okay, so I'll just say, Ms. Savage wanted to know if one of the officers could go get it. Sophia said she can grab it. Thank you. Don't lose the receipt. You get it.
I went to your office, I was like, go stuff there, I guess maybe they've already got it. I was like, I'm gonna get my own coffee, like I went there, I ran to talk to Professor Savage.
Yeah, she was there to get our, yeah.
They were like, we don't have it. So,
Well, because I didn't know I was supposed to put the order in this morning. I thought I could just like saunter into the Starbucks at Kroger at Poplar Plaza, and they were like, no, we don't do that. I was like, oh, okay. Oops, now, anybody that's on the Zoom calls through. So. Hey, Brandon. Can you hear us? Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. How you doing? Can you hear me?
It's happened upstairs too. I mean, in Mitchell 319, there's more than one speaker. Hey, Brandon, can you say something? Are you talking already? Okay, no, let me switch the microphone then.
It's right here. I'm gonna wait like 10 minutes for me to go get the coffee.
Okay, thank you. Under speaker. Where was the?
Go on the, yeah, the mute where the, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so the speakers, we have to switch to one of these probably. I'm gonna try this one. Hey, Brandon, say something now.
Hey, how you doing?
Yay, okay, I'm on the right speaker, thank you. Hey. Hey, Sophia said she's gonna get it.
Yeah, they probably need more than that. So,
Okay. So there is, did you bring the tea kettle?
yeah.
Awesome. So if anybody wants tea, feel free.
I
You all
can't
probably
accommodate
know
if you don't want it now.
I don't know you. Hello.
Howdy,
You just
I'm
joined us.
Ethan Schneider.
Oh, hello, Ethan Schneider. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Student History Society.
He's in my role. I offered them extra credit if they came to the event, or if they logged in to the,
I will say that like, so these are usually like little intimate events where everybody gets to talk, and they feel so formal in the auditorium because of space. But of course, we need the space.
Yeah,
That's
because-
what I feel like Kirk and
COVID.
Rick's gonna feel.
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna feel very, very formal instead of chill.
I think if I present, I'm gonna have to like calm down beforehand.
Yes, yes. There are so many ways to do that that are prescriptive. It's a tough trade-off. Yes.
So I'm confused, like, are we allowed to submit papers that we've done previously, but we don't need to like do the research and such because we've already done it?
Yeah. The idea is that it's like work you've done, and so you're coming and sharing it with us.
Okay, because it sounded almost like you're supposed to work on it and then present it, like, I don't know.
It's like a-
I don't know, I misinterpreted it.
The honors college has like an in progress one. but
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
this is
just-
something you're like working on right now.
Maybe I was looking at wrong things.
Brandon and Anna, can you hear Ms. Savage?
Yeah, when I'm speaking, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's the microphone now? Because usually, and upstairs, the mic is right here.
And then into the-
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's good.
Those are the mics?
That's good, then they can hear
They
you.
look
Oh, so then 319,
That
the
makes so
microphone
much
is
sense
right
though.
above.
Oh,
So
okay.
whatever happens in my class, go through the video.
Okay, that's That's frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't know where the microphone is in
Pepsi.
our class. I
Yeah, I
just
love
use out as loud as
I wish we had
can
more
during
CT on
the
campus.
session.
I hate
Which
coffee.
room are you
Uh, 307.
I can't do it.
in? Is there something right on here that looks kind of like this shape?
I have not even looked. I just zoomed and recorded and my students say they can hear me and I'm like, that's what it is. That's important.
Yeah.
All right.
We got a few more people to admit in. Everybody left in the wings.
So do we need cups too?
There will be cups in it. It comes with little cups and little lids
Do
and
they know
little
that?
stirrers. Well, it's supposed to. If it doesn't, please pull up a picture of it online and say, this is what we need.
Okay.
Because I showed them the picture, and that helps. But it might, it's hard to say what's going to happen over there, to be honest, to be just totally honest.
You know, I have one mug in my office, so.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I
here.
said, what is the most efficient way to get coffee then, if this is how it is? And they were like, we just can't have any. And I was like, I feel like that's not accurate.
Sophia's going to sacrifice her one single can.
Everyone can have one sip with a waterfall.
Theoretically, this is happening.
Yeah, Karen apparently said that she calls that specific carpet in the morning. The way you do,
Yeah.
but she didn't tell me that, neither she told me that until like I'd already done.
Yeah, it takes so long to brew, I just didn't think to mention it.
Well, now I know her future. Okay, so I guess we'll just get started, and then when the coffee gets here, we can like.
Well, you guys are supposed to be drinking it while they're in here, right? Or is everybody sitting far enough apart? It's not a big deal. I don't know what the rules are.
I don't actually know if people aren't allowed to have food or drink in this room. Does it say, is there like a?
There's a
sign?
sign, but we literally have our pizza lectures in here.
That's a good point.
I mean, I trust everybody in here not to like
If anything
destroy
spills,
this.
yeah, I mean, if stuff spills, hopefully people will quickly go and get napkins.
Yeah, it will just roll down.
It'll all collect down
It's
there.
all TJ's problem.
Yeah, TJ can clean it.
So, did you want to start?
So, well, as you guys all probably already know, because you know us both and you're in here, but for the people who are online, my name is Miss Amanda Lee Savage. I am an academic advisor here, and until very recently, I was the sole faculty advisor for the Student History Society, which has been just a joy to be the advisor for. But I am very pleased now to have a co-advisor this year, Dr. Beverly Safianis, who is also our historian of the Middle East at the Department of History. If you haven't already taken a class with her. She is very accomplished. I have had the privilege of hearing her speak on a number of occasions out and about in the community, as well as here at the University of Memphis. And I think she's going to talk just sort of about the data a little bit and about the Student History Society, and then just share with you about her research and what she does here in that process. We like to use these caffeine and cakes to help students and faculty get to know one another better. And as I was saying before, they're usually held in the Hirsch, and it feels like all intimate and close and a little less formal, but hopefully this environment, you all know each other well enough, we can still facilitate some conversation together. Yes, it was with great pleasure that I handed off to Dr. T. Not just this event, but also, of course, Student History Society. I will be phasing out of this role over the next year and handing my baby over to her. And luckily, she is a trustworthy, engaging professional that I couldn't be happier for you all. I think that this, student organization is going to go in a lot of really interesting directions, and I don't know that I could have taken you there. And so I'm really happy to have her here and have her on board.
So I kind of just put the overview of what we're talking about. It's only an hour, and I'm only going to talk probably about 20 minutes of it, I guess. And then I'm going to make space at the end for questions that you guys might have. And I am also recording this, so I'll post it to our class. But I can try and post it. I'll check with Sophia and Sophia Rouse, the president of the Student History Society. I think almost everybody knows Sophia, but yeah, we'll try and see about posting it on YouTube for the YouTube channel for the HER, which is the History Educational Resource Center. Oh, hey, more folks from class. So maybe what I'll do is if I'm, nobody comes. So for today's caffeine and cake, we'll start with the snacks. Feel free to get up and grab more anytime. And the tea, I think, is brewing over there, and Sophia's about to go get the coffee. I just want to tell you a little bit about the Student History Society, and also welcome the Phi Alpha Theta chapter that's here at the University of Memphis. Phi Alpha Theta is the History Honors Society, and it's open to undergraduate and graduate students. And you don't actually have to be a history major to be eligible for Phi Alpha Theta. I can go to the website to show you a little bit more about it. It has like a minimum GPA and a minimum number of credit hours. I think it's 12 credit hours for history classes to be eligible. But the Student History Society is open to anybody who's interested in history, and we have a number of the executive board members here, Caitlin, and TJ, and also Sophia are board members, so they can tell you a little bit more about it if you want later. And then the Epsilon New chapter, that's the chapter of Phi Alpha Theta that's here at the University of Memphis, and I'm the primary faculty advisor for that. As Ms. Savage pointed out, she and I are the co-advisors for Student History Society this semester, and then next semester she's taking on a lot larger projects at the university and kind of nationwide, which is really exciting for Professor Savage. But it does mean that we're kind of shifting around some of the service work for people in the department. So I will be the sole faculty advisor for Student History Society and for Phi Alpha Theta moving forward. Well, by the end of the semester, after Ms. Savage walked our wonderful undergrads through the Herc and the Herc, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. And the two groups, Phi Alpha Theta and Student History Society, have some overlap. There are some members of Student History Society who are also eligible for Phi Alpha Theta. Some of them do decide to accept the invitation to be inducted into the Phi Alpha Theta Society. There are some really great perks to it, like being eligible for prizes and awards for papers delivered at regional or national conferences. And I'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming regional Phi Alpha Theta conference that's in Birmingham, Alabama in February. So it's only about 3 hours away, I think. So 3.5 hours. And you do not have to be a member of Phi Alpha Theta to present at the Phi Alpha Theta Regional Conference, but you do have to be a member to be eligible for their awards for the best paper prizes. And I'll talk a little bit about the upcoming department events and a little bit about study abroad and tell you a little bit about what I did when I was in undergrad and when I was in graduate school. And I'm also part of the Fulbright committee here at the University of Memphis. It was on this semester. I don't know how I'll do it, but I can kind of, I'll show you where on the Study Abroad website you can go to see more information about different programs. And there are also some really exciting events coming up in the spring, including the Phi Alpha Theta banquet, which is the annual banquet that we have usually in March or April. This year is going to be, this academic year, it'll be in April. Everyone is welcome to give us input, give me specifically input on who you would like to see be the keynote speaker at the Phi Alpha Theta conference. Everyone is invited to it. It's not just for Phi Alpha Theta members. So you can just be a member of the Student History Society or just kind of a general person interested in history and come to the award ceremony and the induction and keynote speakers event for Phi Alpha Theta that's in April. And I'll tell you a little bit about my new book. I only brought one copy. It is super sad material. It's about the Syrian Civil War and the Civil War and some other traumatic events from the previous century. But it's an important, I think it covers some really interesting interdisciplinary material about conflict and war and trauma and memory. And then we can have the Q&A and have more snacks. So welcome to our folks, Brandon, Anna, and Taylor that are zooming in. I hope you can hear us okay. Feel free to use the chat feature if you guys want to jump in and say anything, or you can use the raise hand feature. So I'm just going to minimize this a little bit so that you can see this better. This is one of the Phi Alpha Theta images that shows up when you go to the Phi Alpha Theta website. which is phi-alpha-theta.org. So it's kind of straightforward. But you'll see that it says, history is not a burden on the memory, but an illumination of the soul. And it's a quote from John Delbert Acton. I didn't do any real research into who that is, but I just thought it was a lovely image and idea to get us started. I also wanted to point out again that Sanford in Birmingham, Alabama is going to be hosting a regional conference in February. And the deadline, any of you can submit abstracts, but you send them to the chapter advisor. And then the chapter advisor sends it on to, in this case, to the Phi Alpha Theta faculty advisor at Sanford. So it only has to be 250 words, an abstract of a paper that you've written for a class, or that you're writing for a class now, or that you're just working on, even if you didn't submit it for a grade in any classes. And that deadline to submit the 250-word abstract is December 7th to email it to me. And I forgot to bring my business cards, but I will write down my email address. And you guys can look at it. And I'll also put it in the chat. It's kind of my last name, but we took out some, but not all of the vowels. And with the first initial of my first name. Maybe what I'll do for a second is go back to the chat for. Okay, so I'll put my email in the chat for folks to take a look at that as well. And yeah, so like I pointed out, we do have some ideas right now. We have something of a short list of potential speakers for Phi Alpha Theta's banquet in April. We haven't selected, we haven't finalized the date. It'll be either April 7th or April 14th, probably from 6 to 8 p.m., probably on Zoom, but possibly in the UC Fountain View. It's all up in the air, but please email me, or you can reach out to the exec board members from the Syrian History Society, the Student History Society, try and we need to kind of settle who's going to be the speaker pretty soon. I'll double check on the date, but if you can start thinking about it in the next week or two, we can try and reach out to people in November to see if we can book them for April. And then also, so you can click on these. I'll share these slides to our class, and like I said, I'll put it in the YouTube page for the HERC to see if people want to click into any of it. Okay, so these are some of the upcoming events. These two over here. Now these just passed, but this one is actually on the YouTube page, the YouTube channel of the History Educational Resource Center, which is the HERC. So they have 2 graduate students who are PhD students in the history department who kind of are the main peer tutors every semester. It usually rotates out a year, I think, but they did run a study session on effective history writing for history papers, and they posted it on the YouTube channel, so you can click onto the YouTube channel to see it. The Discover Your Major Day was in the UC Ballroom. This is Ms. Amanda Savage and Dr. Crystal Guzouzian. They are the 2 undergraduate advisors in the history department, and they also work very closely with the HERC. Dr. Guzouzian is actually the director of the HERC, I believe, as well as doing a lot of other things in the department. And so their work is really invaluable. You can see the HERC page there. There's also Upswing, which some of you probably are already familiar with for tutoring, and the history department main page. The history department main website. We also have, I only linked to the new TikTok and Instagram accounts of the Student History Society, but the history department does also have a new TikTok account for the HERC. You'll probably see, I don't know how many of you have seen the TikTok videos that Sophia Rouse has been putting up. The Student History Society's TikTok page is going to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, a little maybe sillier, a little bit more connected to popular culture. And then the HERC TikTok is going to be a little bit more focused just on the academic material and a little less cheeky, I guess. And then the study session that I'm going to be running October 21st is just on Zoom. It's not going to be in person. But it is going to be open to Phi Alpha Theta members and to Student History Society members, and really to anybody that would like to know a little bit more about applying to graduate school in the humanities or the social sciences. I really have no background in physics or chemistry, so don't ask about that, but I can show you when we have that event at 3 p.m. on October 21st, I will show you how to look for, programs that you might find to be a good fit for your research interests. So hopefully a few people will come, we'll sign on into the Zoom meeting, and I'll ask people at the beginning, what do you like working on? What's one book or one reading that you've come across while you were in college that you really liked and you want to know more about? And what we'll do is we'll start there and then look up the names of the people, either the author of that book or the people they're connected to. Welcome, hey, feel free to eat, take some food and bring it in if you want. So you start with the names of the people that have written material you're interested in, and then you move from there to find where they're based, like what university they may be based at. And sometimes they won't be at the same place that they were when you published the book. So for example, in the back of my book, it says, Beverly Tsakoyanis is an assistant professor of history at the University of Memphis. So when this came out, I was an assistant professor. Now I'm an associate professor because I need tenure, but it says I'm at the University of Memphis. But let's say, there's a job at the University of Chicago. I'm not that but if I got there, like in 2 years, you want to just make sure that you look up the person and you find where they're at. And then the other important thing about how to apply for these programs is to make sure that you make time to collect your letters of reference or your recommendation letters. So just kind of giving your professors at least 1 month's notice, so 4 weeks. So don't email them like the week before the deadline and for the first time and they've never written you a letter before and ask them for your letter. If you've been in touch with a professor and they've written letters for you before, it's a little bit easier for them to just jump on their computer and find the saved file and just change a few spots for a new fellowship or scholarship or program that you're applying to. But you really want to give people that. So that's kind of the stuff I'll be talking about at that event. And then the ice cream social, the first time I looked at this, I was like, what's the connection? And then I realized he's holding ice cream. So, or he's made it look like he's holding ice cream. So that's going to be the next day, October 22nd, in just outside Mitchell Hall. And I just want to make sure those texts are not about the coffee. And that is my mistake. For those of you who just got here, there will be coffee. I just didn't get it in time. So this is just to tell you more about upcoming events. So we had here we have these 2 events, and October 21st and 22nd we have the study session and the ice cream social. This one's at 12:30. So it's not the same time. And this one, this is diplomat Alan Dubose, and he is the diplomat in residence for this part of the country. So every part of the United States has a diplomat in residence, which means that their post is to be in that part of the country and answer questions about the Foreign Service. We'll tell you a little bit about student programs and internships. And so Mr. Dubose is going to be with pretty much anybody that wants to show up on Zoom Tuesday, October 26th at 6 p.m. Central Time. He is based in Atlanta, so he's going to be on Eastern Time Zone. But he is going to tell, it's going to last about an hour and a half, I think, where his presentation will be about 40 minutes about how to apply to the Foreign Service, how to look up some of the different student programs and internships, even if you don't plan to eventually work in the Foreign Service, the State Department. And this is presented by the Department of History and Career Services, but you'll probably hear about it in a lot of different places because we're sending it to the other career service specialists, not just the ones in the humanities. And it's open to really anyone. You don't have to be a college graduate to apply for the State Department. You pretty much just have to be between the ages of, I think, 21 and 59. And you can be any major, you can not have gone to college, you can, as long as you take the Foreign Service test, which is free to take, and you only pay $50 if you bail within 24 hours of when you're going to take the test. And there are multiple areas of the country to take the test. There are 2 locations in the Memphis area. The test, I think, is usually I think it's 2 or 3 times a year. But so there's a link to register for the meeting where Mr. Du Bois will talk a little bit about that. And then some of the other upcoming events. So movie night, we're not really sure what movie's gonna be picked yet.
It's gonna be Agora, and we're gonna have Dr. Graham and Dr. G there.
Okay, great. So we have to update this and then send this out.
We just settled that.
Okay, cool. So Dr. Crystal Gudzuzian is an expert in the ancient world, well, ancient Greece and Rome. And Dr. Ben Graham is well, he's an expert in the Mediterranean, but for like 1,000 years. So he works mainly on the medieval period, but he also teaches classes on the Roman Empire. But so that sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. So that'll be November 4th in this room, but also on Zoom. And I'm not sure how they're gonna do, hopefully the screen share with the sound and make the video work. And then Professor Guiomar Dueñas Vargas is this in this photo. She's our resident expert on Latin American history, especially in the 19th century. But she was also born and raised in Colombia, the country. And the talk she's giving is on November 5th at 12:45 in this room. And it's part of our History Matters series. So it's kind of a play on how we talk about topics in history, so matters in history, but also on how history is relevant to the present day, so how history matters now. And so she's gonna be talking about women in society, challenging patriarchy in the National University of Colombia. And then this is one of the biggest coups for the department. Joan Scott is a very, very well-known historian and theorist in gender studies, European studies, US history. She's been very significant in the field. She is our speaker for the sesquicentennial lecture. I don't know how many of you see the word sesquicentennial and you're like, why is it every year that we have the sesquicentennial lecture? Because it's not every 250 years, which is what sesquicentennial means, but it has to do with some coins that were from the sesquicentennial. And then we get money every year to have a very big speaker come to the university, although she's going to be doing this virtually. So that's on Zoom, November 11th at 6 p.m. And then this picture is, I think, from last year's HERC and the HERC, but it is this HERC, HURC, is the History Undergraduate Research, I should say conference or consortium, not forum, but anyway, so that is supposed to be in the HERC. If it's a lot of people and we're still doing COVID distancing, by then it'll probably move to here. And it's an opportunity for you guys, if you're undergrads, I actually didn't ask to all of you, well, you're Professor Kim. This is, I don't know how many of you know, Dr. Kim is an expert on the 17th and 18th century. And he's made a super cool game that's like Oregon Trail, but about the hatch of the 17th century. And he's an expert in ArcGIS and gaming history as well, some coding stuff. And so yeah, I mean, other than you, if the students, I didn't ask all of your students, but if you are, the HERC Undergraduate Research Forum is a great place to practice in kind of a warm kind of space. You won't hopefully feel as uncomfortable as you might at like a national conference where you're presenting in front of complete strangers. The HERC and the HERC is a really great opportunity to start kind of workshopping ideas you might have from your research. It is just for undergrads though, but the Phi Alpha Theta conference is for graduate students and the regional conferences. That's for grad and undergrad. And then the last event we have coming up on December 1st is from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., probably in the HERC. Again, with the COVID protocols, we might have to move some stuff around, but it's mainly just we'll have some snacks there, we'll have some relaxing music, have some non-caffeinated tea, some herbal tea to kind of help you guys kind of transition from the end of the year to finals week. And I also put a link here to the relaxation zone. Let's double check that the screen share moves with that. So this is from the University of Memphis Counseling Center. The relaxation zone and the Oasis room have a lot of really soothing spaces, and this pandemic has been really hard for everybody. So it's perfectly healthy to recognize when you need some help. And we all need help sometimes. And coffee, thank you, Sophia. So if people want to, we can take a quick break if anybody wants to get the coffee or the tea now, or we can keep talking. You guys can also just get up and get coffee while I'm talking. But the Oasis room is, we do need to make appointments because of COVID right now. But you can just go to this website and jump in. And then the other link that I had on here is about the study abroad area that we have here at the university. Okay, so study abroad. How many of you have studied abroad? I know Sophia has. I just want to know, actually, yeah, where did any of the undergrads study abroad? I know Sophia did. I'm gonna ask.
I'm going next summer.
Where are you going?
Costa Rica.
Ooh, very exciting. So anybody else thinking of going or has gone before? Yeah.
Thinking of going, I just don't know if I am yet. Italy this summer.
That's awesome. Yeah, what about, and Sophia, you've been to a whole bunch of places, Germany.
I've been basically all over Germany and then Strasbourg, France.
Cool. Dr. Kidd, where did you study abroad in
I did
undergrad?
a year in Turkey, my undergrad in Istanbul. I met my partner there, so
Oh,
married
Istanbul, I've
about
only
10
been.
years ago.
10, okay. But yeah, and then for graduate school, you traveled, weren't you in like?
Yeah, my master's, and this is PSA for people, my master's was at Central European University, which was in Budapest then, now is in Vienna, but it's accredited in the US and in Europe, and you get in, it's fully funded. So housing and stipend, so it's a very good master's program. There's also Americans end up there because it's like, funded master's program. And then it's a very international, lots of people from like Eastern Europe and all over the place. So it's a good program, and now it's in Vienna. So
Dr. Kim brought up a really important point about a fully funded master's program, which is rare in the United States. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the Zoom meeting or how to apply to grad school. But my recommendation is usually to do what I did, which is get your MA as part of a combined MA PhD track program, because they usually pay for your MA and your PhD and you get a stipend. So it's much better than just like jumping in. And plus, if you decide after the master's that you don't want to stay, you don't actually owe them any money. So you don't pay back the money that they spent on your master's. Just so you know. Yeah, you had.
I was gonna ask, that's just any like world history over where you were studying?
yeah, it was they have lots of like varied departments, but it was broadly world history is what they focused on, or what most students did.
Okay, after this, can I get a little bit of information about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
What was the name of it? I can also look it up right now.
Central European University. They're the second most funded university in Europe,
Wow.
but now and they don't have undergrad, they just have master's and PhD. It's all humanities.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so there
It's
are
all in English.
all in English,
Yeah.
very important. So you don't have to learn, I guess, Austrian.
Yeah. They used to be in Budapest, and then they had political issues and were kicked out, and now they're in Vienna.
And I don't know Hungarian or Austrian, so that wouldn't have helped me either. Good thing that they did it all in English for.
Yeah, no, it's sort of done in an American style, and it's technically accredited through the state of New York system, so.
Oh, okay, and so what I had done was my junior year of college, I spent the year at Ben Gurion University, which is in Israel in the Negev Desert. And that was a pretty cool program. One of the things that I did, I mean, that was also in 2003, so it's my information is a little dated, but one of the programs that I was involved with there was through the master's program in Middle East Studies, even though I was there as an undergrad, so they let you kind of take some classes around. And then when I was in graduate school, I did a program at Lebanese American University, which is also accredited through the University of New York. but it's in Beirut. It is not American University in Beirut. That's AUB. That's a different university. LAU is Lebanese American University. It's also in Beirut. Very confusing name, but I did my summer language study there in 2006. So both in 2003 in Israel and in 2006 in Beirut, there were wars. And so the war in 2006, I had to get evacuated out of Lebanon. The Israelis were bombing the Lebanese. And then the war in 2003, the Americans were bombing Iraq. And the last time the Americans bombed Iraq in 1991, Iraq bombed Israel. So the Israelis thought that they get bombed again. So we got to watch, I got to watch like two very different preparedness programming around how the Israelis handled a potential for war in 2000, like March of 2003, and how the Lebanese handled it when war had already started in July of 2006. Which is not to say you shouldn't study abroad. It's just that it was, I loved both of the programs, and it was a really excellent opportunity to meet people from different parts of the world. I really strongly recommend that you guys consider study abroad programs, even if you don't think you'll end up going to graduate school or specializing in graduate school on the region that you travel to for your study abroad program. Just because it's really a great way to learn a little bit more about different parts of the world. You get to meet people, you can even fall in love, get married, or not. You can just, it doesn't, I didn't mean that to be like, you all need to go get married, but like, just go around the world and, you know, learn stuff, and it can end up giving you a lot of really awesome experiences around the world that can help shape you as a global citizen when you come back to the States. I wasn't going to talk that much about my book because it gets pretty specific, but I put the cover on here. It was this cover design is from a painting by a Syrian refugee artist, Anessa Hamsi, who is now in Germany, and his wife, who he met in Lebanon, is also an artist and a musician like he is, and she's half Syrian, half Lebanese, but they're both refugees in Germany right now. But this design incorporates part of his painting, which is called Wall of Memories, which he painted in 2015 when he had already escaped Syria and the civil war, and it was actually sold to a buyer in the United States. But I kind of chose it because there's like a lot of different, to me, it looks like a lot of different faces, and there's a lot of different colors, and it kind of, the way that I also interviewed him, and you know, when I was first looking at visual sources, and he was very generous about allowing me permission to use the artwork as part of the cover design. And I'd asked him a little bit about painting, and we talked a little about how I interpreted it, because obviously the way we interpret art can vary from person to person. But I was really drawn to the yellows and the purples in this, which to me felt like there are, even though there's, you know, blood red and you know, grays, and it seems a little bit chaotic and kind of troubled or in pain. There's also ways that all these colors go into the same people. So you can have in the same person a deep pain and trauma, and also be a survivor and have some kind of measure of hope. Have, you know, you can hold the memory of someone who passed away tragically and still remember the happy times with them and honor their memories. So, and I also like the way that the faces sometimes look like they're the same person but looking in different ways. So it's a really beautiful piece that I thought fit well with some of the work that I was doing, because so my book just came, this is my first published book, and it's based in part on my research from graduate school and in part on research that I did after I finished my PhD from Washington University in St. Louis in 2014. So it covers kind of the origins of mental health work in the 1890s into the present day, and it looks at psychiatric, cosmopolitan, biomedical ideas about the brain as like the center of emotions, and also something by the time you get to the 1960s, something that is involved with chemicals that can affect your mood and your thinking processes. But it also, my book also looked at non-biomedical frameworks for illness and trauma. So spaces that included thinking of illness as the cause of spirit possession or evil-eye jealousy, and the exorcisms that can come from that sort of disease etiology, that kind of framework of what makes someone sick. So I worked with some oral history records, in terms of interviewing healers, and I also interviewed a lot of Syrian psychiatrists when I was in Syria in 2009 and 2010. And I'd been to Syria before that as well, but I left Syria before the civil war began. That was in 2011. But I stayed in touch with a lot of the physicians who almost all became refugees and are now practicing in Turkey or in Saudi Arabia or in Germany or Spain, is where most of them are. But I also looked at journalistic nonfiction and historical fiction, which I don't know how many of you guys have taken the kinds of history classes where the professors tell you a little bit about cultural history and social history, not just diplomatic history, military history, or political history. So in military history, for example, you might focus on strategies and technologies of war. In social history, you can also look at war, like World War I or World War II, or the Syrian Civil War, but you'll focus more on the ordinary lives of the everyday lives of ordinary people. So how did the war affect this foot soldier and his family or her family or their family? And there's social history can still pick up on what you might see in political history or diplomatic history, like a big treaty. You could talk about the Balfour Declaration in 1917 in maybe a political or diplomatic history class, and be thinking about Lord Balfour and the British government. But then in a social history approach, you would also look at how regular Zionists in British Mandate Palestine or regular Arabs and Palestinians were reacting to the Balfour Declaration. And you could look at diaries, you could look at newspapers, you could interview people who are maybe grandchildren of people who were around in 1917 and have this kind of received narrative passed down from generations. So the last thing I wanted to mention before we kind of talk, open it up for questions and answers or more cookies or cinnamon rolls or whatever is a little bit about intersectionality wheels. So I use this in every class, and I would like to introduce it to pretty much anybody that meets me, because intersectionality is such an important part of how you can contextualize the primary sources that you work with, and how you can also see for yourself how different people in different situations might filter the same evidence in different ways. So let me move this for a second. So for example, when I teach my science and technology and world history survey class, I'll mention, I'll put in the middle of this, for example, Isaac Newton or Charles Darwin. And then that's your chance to get to think about, okay, what was this person's gender? What was their religious background? What was their socioeconomic status? Who were they well connected to? There's a reason that Charles Darwin is the one that one always points to for theories of evolution rather than Alfred Russel Wallace. And Alfred Russell Wallace did not have the kinds of connections that Charles Darwin did. And so there's ways that you can use an intersectionality wheel in any class you're working with for any source you're working with to kind of get a sense of what they were operating in. So this innermost circle is the unique circumstances of power, privilege, and identity that a person may have. So Charles Darwin, an elite man from the United Kingdom, and that definitely colored his understanding of quote unquote races in the world. And he's also pretty misogynistic. So it's a way in which the 19th century frames his worldview. And so in the second circle, these are your aspects of identity, which change over time. So age, like you obviously start out young, unless you're Benjamin Button, and then we get old as we go. And so how old you are will affect how people interact with you, it'll affect your status in the legal system that you're in. Like, are you a legal minor? Are you allowed to enter into contracts? Are you not? Are you of rational capacity? Are you considered, are you certified insane? The reason that that certification affects you is that you have the legal system, you have the medical system, you have paperwork that tracks along that can influence other people's decisions about your care. That you would not, in a lot of different parts of the world, you would not be allowed to enter into contracts, financial contracts, if you were already, if a judge had already, or a doctor had decided that you were considered not of rational capacity to act. So refugee status is another really big one. Do you quote unquote belong in a place? What happens when the system, the immigration system, the legal system, colonization, wherever you are, you could be talking about the British Empire and refugees from the partition, from India and Pakistan. You could be talking about people who've left Algeria and made their way to France right after the Algerian War for Independence in the 1960s. You could be talking about refugees today that are leaving Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq. Their status leaves them vulnerable to a lot of exploitation, to a lot of violence. And so that's just, there's a whole bunch of different ones out here. So the third circle, the blue one, are the various kinds of discriminations that can impact here. So let's say racism and refugee status, or Islamophobia and refugee status. If a person is a refugee from Afghanistan and Muslim, and you're in a society that has virulent Islamophobia or racism or xenophobia, those sorts of things will shape that person's experience. And so when you read a primary source by somebody that is from that community, all of those sorts of things in that wheel should be part of how you interpret the data that you're working with and how you analyze the context in which that developed. And then the outermost circle, those are like the largest forces like war, economy, legal system that can reinforce exclusion. Or they can be opportunities to engender inclusion. So if you change the legal system, for example, to allow same-sex marriage, then even if there's some homophobia, the legal system at least is on the side of the minority group that had been previously excluded from that system. So there are, this last part is mainly from my World Society 45 class, because we are going to be talking about a book by Tsitsi Kazaremba, who is a Zimbabwean author. She also had studied psychology for a while. She was going to be a psychologist and decided to be a writer. But her book, Nervous Conditions, is actually a play on Frantz Fanon's work from The Wretched of the Earth. He has a quote in it that says, "The condition of the native is a nervous condition." And so the book is a really powerful piece on decolonization and racism in Zimbabwe. So the intersectionality wheels are just very key to kind of thinking about these things. And then on this side, I have, let me see if I can make this bigger. So here are types of oppression, how they affect the target group and how they affect the non-target group. And so this would look different in different places. So here where it says religion, and then the target group would be non-Christian, and the non-target group would be Christian. That's only in a place where there's enough Christians in the community. So like in Israel, the non-target group would be Jewish, and then the non-Jewish would be the target. In Pakistan, the target group would be the specific kind of Muslims, because there's lots of different sects in Islam. The Muslims that are kind of supported by the Pakistani government, and then everybody else is the target group. This chart was built for the US and Canada mainly. So that's why it has non-Christian as a target group and Christian as a non-target group. But under the type of oppression, so you can see gender, this actually doesn't really change in a lot of different places, but women is the one oppressed. And then sexual orientation, ability, so people with disabilities as the target group, people without disabilities as a non-target group. One of the ways that that's important is that you might not even think about how, how a ramp can help people with a wheelchair. But before the Americans with Disabilities Act, it was not required for buildings to have that ramp. So people with a wheelchair were excluded, but not just people with a wheelchair, people with a stroller, people with crutches. So there are ways in which you have to imagine that these systems don't just impact the one oppressed group, it actually affects all of us. And so that's kind of the material that I like to include whenever I kind of start a class. I figured I'd also mention it to you guys because I use this approach in all the different research that I work with. So that's kind of the main material that I wanted to show you guys. Does anybody have any questions about upcoming events or study abroad programs or my research or want more coffee? Yeah.
Why did you choose that name for the title of your book or the?
Oh, yeah, Disturbing Spirit. Thank you for asking that. I actually mentioned this in when I've been interviewed for the book, like for podcasts and stuff, they ask about that as well. So there's more than two meanings to it, but the biggest two meanings has to do with disease etiology and trauma theory. So disturbing spirits has in the disease etiology, so like the way people imagine what causes illness can come from jinn, which are the spirits. So Jinn is you might in English, you might know the word genie, like Aladdin and the genie, that comes from the word jinn. No relation to the alcohol, but it's spelled with a G. But jinn are these smokeless beings of fire. You can't see them. There could be like 50 of them in here right now. You would never know. And the Quran, which is the sacred text of Muslims around the world, has an entire surah, a whole chapter on the jinn, Surah the Jinn. And so to go into any part of the world where there are Muslim believers, they will be familiar with the existence of jinn. And there are ways to interpret the Quran that might suggest that jinn can affect regular people and human and like animals as well, like especially cats and dogs. And they can take their form and they can choose to exert their will on the human frame and that or animals, and that can lead to maybe erratic behaviors, disordered thoughts, and disordered speech. And then and so the way you would deal with a spirit who has disturbed a body is to pull that spirit out, like with an exorcism. But the other disturbing spirits meaning has to do with trauma theory, where war is awful. War really damages like the built environment around you, but it also damages people, including the people who survive, even if there are no visible external scars. And so that's the other meaning for the title, is that your spirit is disturbed by these events. So like the psyche, the soul, or, your emotional well-being. And so those are the two main kind of meanings that I had from the title. But there's also another way in which medicine, the medical system that involved forced institutionalization, or forced electroshock or even electroconvulsive therapy for people who were diagnosed in the 1940s or 50s or 60s as schizophrenic, they hurt the person. So the medical system that was meant to heal them was also a form of violence on that patient. And so that's another way that in terms of the disability studies movement, and something that you might see as Mad Pride studies has to do with reclaiming some of the labels, destigmatizing these communities that have been targeted, and finding other ways to express yourself. So through memoirs of the patients who were, so you might see CSXM. This is consumer, survivor, ex-patient, or MAD. So the CSXM community are people who have survived, they could be consumers of psychiatric healthcare, they could be survivors of psychiatric hospitals, they could be ex-patients, or they could identify as mad woman, but not with the stigma that has been applied over the last century or so. And so you could look at CSXM narratives, so memoirs of survivors, or historical fiction, which is some that I use for the book, like from Hanan Sheikh, who's a Lebanese writer. She wrote the story of Zahra. Zahra means like a rose, but it's a name in Arabic. So Zahra, the main character in this book, it's about the Lebanese Civil War, experiences electroshock therapy and involuntary kind of being committed to a hospital against her will. And while Hanan al-Sheikh herself did not actually survive, or did not actually spend time in a psychiatric hospital and undergo ECT or EST, which is electroshock therapy or electroconvulsive therapy. Electroconvulsive therapy means enough shock that you experience convulsions. So EST and ECT are not always the same thing. EST would usually be a lower voltage. But so the character in this historical fiction experiences this, and there's a section in the book that explains the experience. And so somebody who is a psychiatric historian might just look at hospital records that were written by the doctors, which I also looked at 2 hospitals in Beirut and just outside of Damascus. So I did look at some records from the doctors and the nurses, but I also looked at historical fiction that came from the perspective of the patients, which is more of a social history approach. And so that kind of gives you the descriptions of the pain of surviving some of these kind of medical treatments, some of which years later did not seem to be particularly effective. So there's a way in which medical historians, we look at a lot of ideas about how scientific concepts change over time. So I don't know how many of you've ever had a fever. Did a doctor just give you a bunch of leeches and bleed you out?
No.
Not now, but it happened to George Washington because leeching was a very common approach for dealing with fever. Short term, by the way, leeching does temporarily drop your blood pressure, your temperature. And some people, you can still use leeching for very specific issues around trying to heal a surgical wound, but you don't do it the way that people do that kind of. So medical historians and psychiatric historians especially can still look at kind of approaches to illness that changed over time. So I don't know how many of you have heard of Freud, Sigmund Freud, or the diagnosis of hysteria, if someone's hysterical.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what a hysterectomy is? Is removal of the uterus.
Just stop women's hysteria.
So hysteria was a woman's uterus just wandered away in her body somewhere and she's crazy. So that's what hysteria was as a medical diagnosis, like a psychiatric. Obviously, that is not a condition anymore that is accepted by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is now, I think, at the DSM-5. But that means there's been 5 editions of it. Like the DSM used to have homosexuality in it as a mental illness. And so that's another example, by the way, of how homophobia can also be connected to ideas around health. And so there's a lot of being a medical historian, so I'm kind of like medical historian, but also social and cultural historian. I'm interested in what people think is healthy and how people get to that healthy place. Do they use biomedical treatment? Do they use folk healing? Do they use amulets and prayer? Do they use herbal teas? Chamomile is actually really good for you. So there's a lot that I kind of work on that is on the margins of a couple different accepted fields in history, like cultural history, social history, medical history, psychiatric history especially, but I also work in interdisciplinary spaces through disability studies and trauma studies, gender and sexuality studies, where you might look to poems or songs or historical fiction, artwork. So yeah, that's kind of, I'm glad you asked about that, because I do love talking about that part of the book. Does anybody have other questions?
So I'm undergraduate. I'm very new. So I don't really know what I want to study. What did you do to find out medical history when you were like, this is the shit that I want to do?
I did not figure that out in undergrad. I was a Near Eastern and Judaic Studies major in undergrad at Brandeis University, which is just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So that was an interdisciplinary program. So I took classes from anthropologists, from historians, from scholars of religious studies, from people in literature and film studies. I was just kind of interested, I grew up in New York City. I'm from a mixed background, ethnically, religiously. My mom was an immigrant to this country, to the United States from the Dominican Republic. And my dad was born in the US, but his parents were from Minsk and Kiev before the Bolshevik Revolution. So I was from a mixed background and I was really interested in parts of the world that had a lot of diversity. And I just kind of became interested in, and that was like the 1980s and 1990s, and the Lebanese Civil War was raging in the 80s and well in the 70s, but I wasn't alive yet, so I didn't know that. But there was an interest, I had an interest in learning about lots of different parts of the world. And I just kind of ended up gravitating to the Eastern Mediterranean as an undergrad. And then in graduate school, I picked a program in history that also did a combined master's and PhD. So the way Dr. Kin was talking about how you might factor in how expensive it is to go to graduate school, I recommend things like Central European University where the master's is paid for you, or going to a program that has an MA PhD combined track. And then while I was there at Washington University in St. Louis, I took classes in Middle Eastern studies, in Israeli studies, but I also took world history classes, like studying empire, especially British imperialism and French imperialism. And then along the way, I got interested in, well, it's often when you end up studying the Middle East, people end up also studying war, because unfortunately there's been a lot of wars in, kind of from Morocco to Iran for the last couple centuries, but well, last century. Well, yeah. So I was interested in war, but I wasn't so interested in like how the wars were fought so much as what happened to people. So that I was kind of drawn to social history pretty early on, like even as an undergrad. And so I was interested in, like I would study something about Israel and Palestine, but I really want to know more about Israelis and Palestinians rather than like the Balfour Declaration. So it's still key to know about the Balfour Declaration, but then to kind of switch your approach. And also I was in my junior year of undergrad, when I was at Ben Gurion University, I was kind of exposed to a lot of different kinds of Israelis, including non-Jewish Israelis. So 1 in 5 Israelis is not Jewish. If you're talking like Muslim or Christian, mainly, although there's also Baha'i and Druze. But if you're talking about the area that is the 1948 borders, that's like 1 in 5. If you talk about 1967, and then include West Bank and Gaza, it's actually 50% Jewish, 50% not, because there's a lot of Palestinians. The vast majority now of whom are kind of dispersed all around the world. But there are some in refugee camps. And so I got to meet people my junior year of college that were from all these different backgrounds. And I came back wanting to know even more. But when you're in graduate school, people might suggest to you that you not work on the Arab-Israeli conflict until you make tenure somewhere, at least in this country. So that's what I did. So I switched to Syria and Lebanon, and now I'm tenured. So I'm going to be writing more.
There you go.
Israel now.
You did it.
So, but anything you want, like my minor field and classes I teach every year here include world since 1945 and science and technology and world history. And that class goes all the way to like the 7th century, bits of, I mostly focus on the period after, 1405, but which is the death of Chamberlain. Dr. King knows what I'm talking about, but there's it's hard to teach large surveys, but I do them pretty frequently now. So I do have some interest in comparative history and in kind of, so I don't just work, even though my research has mostly been on the Eastern Mediterranean with Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. I teach classes that include lots of different parts of the world. And it helps that, I also speak Arabic, French, Spanish, Hebrew, and English. So I can work with sources from a lot of different parts of the world. And I learned it from, well, I grew up with English and Spanish because of my mom, but I learned French and Hebrew and Arabic in college and graduate school. And you guys can do it. You just have to study up. Yeah.
Thing is, I learned Arabic in high school, but the Arabic program here kind of got shut down.
So does Professor Abdulghani Bayakli not teach anymore?
So when I was trying to sign up for this, there's only an intermediate class. And I wanted it to be, because I'm double majoring, I wanted it to be my other major. But since they don't have it, I switched to Spanish. But I still want to learn it.
Yeah,
just I
so
don't really know where to go.
there, something that I had in graduate school, there might be an undergrad version of it, is the National Security Education Program has the Boren Fellowships and Critical Language Grants that include Arabic, Korean, I think Mandarin, Chinese.
I took one in my undergrad for Turkish.
Turkish.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
like the critical language scholarships through the State Department for like, it's unfortunate, but languages that are like
That they're
important for
buying.
national security.
Yeah.
So like Turkish, Arabic, Hindi, Urdu, and if you get in, it's fully funded summer. They pay for your flights. You get like a training in DC, and then you spend the summer just intensive learning the language. I did one in Istanbul. When I applied to it though, like no one applied for Turkish, so like literally everyone got in our year. Like Arabic is like there's languages that are more like Arabic super competitive, I know. But
I
like,
got that one for Arabic, but the reason I turned it down was because NSEP Boren, the National Security Education Program's Boren Fellowship, which is named after like a diplomat or something. Hold on, I'm just gonna make sure that I share it with the folks over here. I turned it down because however long they give you the money for. I'm recording all this also, but you can feel free to take pictures. They gave me funding to do a year in Lebanon to improve my Arabic, but that means you owe either the Department of Defense or the intelligence community a year of work afterwards. And the reason that's tricky is because I was planning to go into academia, and if I had used that money, and I know other people who did, but who are still also planning to go into academia, it will shape the way people in the field interact with you, because they'll think you're a spy. Because if you do go to the intelligence community afterwards, it's kind of being a spy. So it depends. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's cool, but that's not what I wanted to do. So I turned down the money, even though I did get the NSEP Board. So I still write that I got it on my CV, but I also put dictionary.
yeah, before the critical language scholarships through the State Department has no service requirement. So all the people that were in that, like I met Boren fellows and they're like, oh, I have to go do my service. I'm like, all the critical language scholarship, it's just
No
because,
strings.
yeah, they just hope that.
But you will decide to
You know,
be
so I got them. I just went back.
That's really good to know. That
Yeah,
you can do
so-
just the language part without the point.
Yeah.
Well, another thing is the Peace Corps. I never did it, and that's one of my regrets. I would have loved to have been in the Peace Corps, but the Peace Corps will send you somewhere, and then you are never allowed by the CIA or the DoD to be a spy in that country. And they do it on purpose because they don't want the Peace Corps to get tainted. So that way you can go be in the peace, like the speaker that we had in the World Society 45 class, who had been in the Peace Corps. He was in the Peace Corps, I don't remember, he was in Afghanistan. So he would have never been able to be a spy in Afghanistan. But he could be a spy in Pakistan, which is super convenient if you have stuff going on with Afghanistan. But that's one of the ways that like the different programs that you might apply to can help you figure out what it is you want to do. Like you could totally go into the Peace Corps and then end up, in the Foreign Service and still get placed. I think you can get placed where you had been in the Peace Corps as long as you're not in the Foreign Service because you're also in the CIA, which some people are, but not everybody. So, is there any more questions? It's okay to not know what you want to study and don't feel like, I know that our university does not have any Turkish, there's no Persian, there's no Kurdish. There's a lot of languages that we don't teach here. Even Hebrew, I think you only can get 4 semesters of.
Yeah.
So that's not super convenient for wanting to do something in the Middle East. I don't think we teach most dialects of Chinese, probably just Mandarin. But there's ways in which you can still do this later. So don't feel like finishing up, I almost said Washington, at U of M limits what you can do next. So definitely, I highly recommend traveling after the pandemic is over. Or, go, but, be vaccinated and wear a mask. But the travel alone is worthwhile. Just don't go into a ton of debt. Try and be savvy about it, the way Dr. Kim and I have been doing it. Like I was invited by the Saudi government for 9 days to check out modern art and contemporary art in May of 2017. I do not recommend going to Saudi Arabia in May. It was like 120 degrees. And I had this long abaya. It was really uncomfortable. But they paid for it. Saudi Aramco paid for the entire thing. Am I a sellout? Maybe. But when I got back, when I was at the event with the Art Museum of the University of Memphis in 2018, I ripped apart the Saudi oil politics and the U.S. connection to it, and but I didn't say any of that while they were paying for me in Riyadh and Jeddah and Dammam and Tehran. You have to just be kind of strategic about how you use funding to travel. And also Tel Aviv University paid for me to get to Israel for 2 weeks in like posh hotels, and that was the same summer I went to Saudi Arabia. And I was just really careful about my passport. I'm only a US citizen, so I don't have, but you can get 2 passports as a US citizen because of Israel. You can get one of your passports will be the 10-year, and one is a renewable 2-year. Just make sure you don't bring the wrong one, because you need one for countries that allow you to enter if you've been to Israel, and you need one for countries that don't. So I used the 2-year one to go to Lebanon and Syria, and I used the 10-year one to go to Israel and Turkey and everywhere else. And yeah, I did get flagged though leaving Israel because I brought the passport that had the Saudi and the Jordanian stamps in it. It totally was in the racial and religious profiling line. Oh well. But yeah, so a lot of cool stuff. Oh, we're just a little over time, but if I didn't bring my card, but if you guys want to write down my email address, or I'll make sure that the department sends out the material that I had here. Do any of you folks on Zoom have any questions? You can unmute if you want. Never mind. That's a cute picture, Taylor. Anyway, there's a little text on there. Oh, does that mean no, you don't have questions? Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, so yeah, I guess if you guys have questions, you can always email me. I do want you guys to consider, the Student History Society as a great kind of forum of students. Do any of you exec board folks want to say anything?
It's really low commitment. You kind of just show up to what you can. There's officer positions, especially this next semester, that are becoming available. So if you want something to put on your resume, work with that.
Yeah, there's also here, they've got a TikTok page.
Oh, yeah. We definitely do.
I don't know how to.
Oh,
I think this is my favorite one. I don't have to play it if you don't want. It's hilarious.
no, you can play if you want.
It's not wrong.
I mean, I think we will.
Oh, has everybody seen this?
I haven't seen that.
Okay,
I've
I've
seen it.
I don't have one.
Wait, I'm gonna share.
Yo soy negro que yo.
Nice song.
One that goes with the track.
Where they go, they down, they saw. Moga moja, say something. 보내게가 건너서. Yo soy negro que yo 되는가. Where they go, they 재미는 없어. 퇴근해도 마찬가지. Tell me what I got to do. 가본 대로 back to score. I'm a naughty dog, I'm a good shit, 나는 걸로. I'm a 여기는 춤춰. 아무렇지 않아 보이게. 아무 생각하기 싫어. I'm get a silent 자식. I'm sick of that. You're on my everyday. Give it up, 반갑다. I'm a naughty night dancer. 아무렴은 taste so boring. 아무래도 reference가 시급한 주세요 가 스트레스가 백업 하실 만큼만 복소파 부시풀 날야 What a my dogs 어디야 너희 옷대 병내 추려 닭대며 깨싸와 클럽은 구미가 잘랑경겨 우리 집 거실은 발랑 well 왜 뿌리는 영영 그 샤담
Yeah, that's.
Are they actually finishing what's back there?
Yes, they're gonna finish it. At least the news from the department chair earlier today was that they probably will be done with that massive construction project by the end of October. Yeah.
What exactly are they doing?
I think that they're replacing parts of the pipes, but not all of them.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, I find it fascinating to see them working on the pipes. Like,
Yeah.
I like looking at that.
I mean, they've turned off the water a few times, but usually it wasn't during, like, it's like from 6 to 8 in the morning today, I think the water was on. Or tomorrow, but, yeah, so fun times.
If
That's
you
what
want to
the
be in a
TikTok-
TikTok,
Was it?
if you want to be in a TikTok, we're filming one Wednesday.
Yeah.
Your face isn't in it. We're gonna do the ghost wearing sunglasses thing.
Oh, my God, yes,
Oh.
please.
And we're gonna use like we're using like tiger blue colors. We thought,
Wait, this, like another version of this one?
yeah, no, that, but it's like, I will show you a video after this.
These are many faculty members.
And students, a lot of SHS students that I wanted to do.
Wait. I wanna
Like,
make
just-
sure that the Zoom
Just
thing-
hated it to me insistently.
Yeah, I know, I like didn't give people an option.
at night.
I mean, I'm almost 40. The TikTok, it's a newer thing. I shouldn't have called it the TikTok. That makes sense. It's a new thing and it's fun that you guys know it and can do stuff on it. But it's grown, I mean, between Instagram and TikTok, like the Student History Society now has 50
We
members.
have 55, I don't know,
55.
we have a lot now.
That's
Like I said,
exciting.
Yeah, it started my freshman year, which is TJ and I. So-
Wait, really?
No, like we had like 2 more people.
Just start collecting taxes from, look how
Yeah.
far we've come.
So I would two,
Yeah.
and they graduated, and then COVID hit.
And then I just kind of was like, okay, I'll do this. And then one day I was referred to as the president, and that's how I got elected.
But now that it's a registered student organization, we do have constitution and bylaws and all the
Yeah.
boring bureaucratic stuff. But it will help with institutional continuity, because now there's like routine elections. Are the meetings always Thursdays at 3 p.m.?
As of right now, I guess, because I sent a poll and it just really seemed to be the best time for everybody.
The reason that is great is because 3 p.m. Thursdays, this room is available. So Karen Bradley, the department administrator, did she book it? I'll email her to confirm that she's gonna book this room so you guys can spread out. And yeah, so I guess that's all for that. Goodbye, everyone on Zoom, wherever the camera is. Is it there?
It's up
It's up
there.
there.
Bye. Email if you have questions, Taylor or Michael. I think Brandon may have skipped off, but yeah. Thank you guys for attending. You can unmute if you want to say hello. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Hello.
Hello. And hello, Taylor, if you're there.
Join SHS.
Yes, join the student.
We have
History
stickers
Society.
and we're getting t-shirts by January.
Ooh, t-shirts, guys. Did you hear that?
January is a
And stickers, come on now. Don't put-
Stickers.
don't-
You should have led with that.
I did.
She did.
Yeah. Sorry.
Then we're getting the temporary tattoos, we don't have time to cut them. We have
Oh.
paper.
We're gonna be so cool.
You all already, but you'll be cooler.
That's
Stickers.
my God.
All right.